to this morning's speaker. Guide Dogs for the Blind, the general title. And I know we're all very familiar with guide dogs. We see them around. There are two here today, if you haven't noticed them. There's a thing in the theatre, they say, never act with children and animals. But so far they've been very good. They've been very well behaved and not interrupted. So, although you see the guide dogs in common use, I don't think we know much about what goes on behind the scenes. And I think we'll find out more about that today. If I could welcome to tell you more about it, Pauline Clayton. Pauline.
Good morning, everybody. It's lovely to be here. And thank you for inviting us and our dogs. We are ex-puppy raisers, Brian and I. We don't do it anymore because I'm a bit wobbly on the feet. David is now going to tell you all the tech, the serious side of it, the information. And then I'm going to tell you about the fun bit afterwards, and that's the puppies. We have here today our own withdrawn guide dog. We're not allowed to say the fail word. You know, they have mental health issues if you do. So we have to say withdrawn. And Frank is 6, and he's a very good boy. And here we have Zag, who comes in at the end of the alphabet. And he is 9 months, is he? He's 9 months old, and he is into his first initial training. So I'll hand you over to David. Keep talking. No, I don't. Yes, so we have 2 dogs at home. We have Captain, who is a large 40-odd kilo retriever cross lab. Captain's nearly 10, and he gets very bored with people. And it's, can I go home now, Mum? You know, so we don't bring him. Frank is, say, just turned 6, and he loves people. So later on, you'll all be able to have a pat and a stroke, and he'll love you forever. And hopefully Zag as well. He'll be off duty, so you'll be able to have a little chat with him.
First of all, introductions, Pauline and Brian, who are puppy raisers as well as volunteers. That's Frank. Frank is a half chocolate, half black dog who actually went through all his training, and Pauline will tell you about him later on. We've also got Humphrey at the back, you may have seen. Humphrey's our substitute. If I can't get a dog to go, I take Humphrey with me. And I took him to an event at some mad place called Bad Dog or something, to the WI. And actually we had a nice time, and we had a cup of tea afterwards, and this very old lady, she must have been 90, said, "Does your dog need to go outside, dear?" And I said, "I've had him 4 years and he hasn't yet." And the chairman said, "If he does, it's going to be very spectacular." Guide dogs is probably, I've been involved with lots of charities over time, and this is the one which seems to me to be the most dependent on volunteers. We've got 4,000 volunteers in 80 different roles, and these are not volunteers that come along to events. These are people who are committed 24/7. So they're looking after puppies. Oh, I forgot to mention Zach, because this is Zach. Zach is a puppy in training, despite the size of him. How old is he now?
9 months.
9 months. So he's probably got another 6 months before he goes into formal training. But as I say, this is a dedication of people who take these dogs into their homes. We did a little calculation the other day of how much it would cost to run guide dogs if we didn't have volunteers. And it would cost us another 35 million a year, we reckon. Because if you think about it, these people are 24/7, 4,000 times in the maths. I'm an accountant and I can't do the maths, but it's a lot. So this is what we do. And the thing about guide dogs now is it isn't just about dogs. Guide dogs are involved with helping children, adults. Everyone, when you say guide dogs for the blind, thinks of the dog, because it's a very strong brand. But that is an incorrect description of what we do now, because point 1, it's not just guide dogs, and point 2, it's not just for the blind, because very, very few people in this country are actually totally blind. They're visually impaired, which means they need a dog. So we thought about, do we need to change our title? And we thought, no, it's such a strong brand name. So instead we changed the logo. So this is the new logo. Has anyone got the old one on?
No.
Well, the old one was a picture of someone with a dog. And the new management decided we need to appeal to a broader audience than that. So this is our new logo. Obviously not everyone can have a guide dog for two reasons. One, it's practically impossible to produce enough. And secondly, anyone guess roughly what the cost of a guide dog is, its life from the time it's born until it retires? Give me some numbers.
50,000?
It's £60,000 per dog, yeah, because basically we pay for everything. So we pay for their food, we pay for their medical bills, and a guide dog owner only pays 50p to get a guide dog. And the only reason it's 50p is because that builds a contract between us and that person. We still own the dog, but they're effectively leasing it. And when a guide dog retires, that person who's had it has the opportunity to keep the dog for themselves if they want to, and have another one when we can, yeah. Now, talk a little bit about the pandemic, because the pandemic hurt us really badly. We couldn't train any of our dogs, we couldn't socialise any of our dogs. So the waiting time for a guide dog has now gone out to 2 years, which is a horrendously long time. And bear in mind, that's not just for a new guide dog owner, that's for someone who had a dog which is now retired. And then they have to go back onto a cane again, which is terrible. So guide dogs work usually, they start full working when they're 2, roughly, and we retire them between 7 and 9, depending on the dog. Some earlier, some later. You know, sometimes a dog will just give up. You know, it's had enough when it's 6 or 7 and when we take it out. But 9 is a good age for a guide dog. Our oldest one that died, that belonged to Dave and Jam, wasn't it? It was 17. Which meant he'd actually retired longer than he worked, which is basically, which is probably most of our ambition in life, isn't it, to do that, I think. And he didn't go to sleep because his heart and lungs went, it's his back end went. It's nearly always the same with Labradors, back end going. Now, about going back to the lockdown, once lockdown was lifted, when we released the puppies that were being trained, a lot of them freaked out because they lived in a house with 3 people. You take them into the middle of Exeter and there's 1,000 people, they just freaked out. And we had to withdraw quite a lot of them, so catching up is really hard work for us at the moment. But we are breeding very fast. And I was saying to someone before, we had a record litter just before Christmas last year where we matched a German Shepherd bitch with a Golden Retriever dog, and she had 16 puppies. All healthy and fit. We even got on breakfast television, so I mean, it's that unusual, but they're now a year old. They're all being puppy raised, they're being looked after by people, and they're all doing very well. Because you've got, it's interesting, the intelligence of the German Shepherd and the steadiness of the Golden Retriever. Because Labradors can be, some Labradors are brilliant, but some of them you just give up with, because it's a... And we have never yet trained a brown chocolate Labrador puppy to become a guide dog. They just they haven't got the concentration. They're lovely dogs, and they go on to do lots of other useful things, like becoming sniffer dogs and assistance dogs. But they lack the concentration to be a guide dog, is the problem. Frank is an interesting one. As I said, Frank is half and half, if you forgive the expression. And Pauline will tell you a bit more about him later on. But he almost broke the mould. His dad was black, wasn't it? And his mum was chocolate. That's right. That's right. So I think we've even given up trying now, to be quite honest. So over 50% of our dogs are Labrador cross retriever. We've found over time that is the best combination that actually works quite well. We've tried all sorts of others, and the first guide dogs, which were first formed in 1932, were all German Shepherds, because that's the only thing people understood, that you could train a dog. And over time, we've tried all sorts of different things. Some have failed, some haven't. We tried Labradoodles, that worked for a bit, and then the problem is if you mix anything with a poodle, because a poodle's so intelligent, it gets bored really quickly. So when you give it the same command for the 5th time, it goes, I don't want to do that anymore. I've done that, can I now move on? Yeah. And we've tried lots of blinds. I mean, my dogs I used to have were Rhodesian Ridgebacks, which would be a disaster. They would probably eat the blind person rather than guide them. So life of a guide dog, basically what we do, we have brood bitches, which are all looked after around Leamington Spa, where our breeding centre is, in people's houses, which adds to this enormous number of hours that volunteers give us, because that's a pretty important job. The reason we do that is if the dog spends its first 6 weeks in a home environment, mixing and doing all sorts of things, it's much more likely to be a stable dog after it goes back. After 6 weeks, we take it to the breeding centre in Leamington and it's checked for health and all the other things, but also its reaction to things like loud bangs and crashes and things like that, because obviously you can't have a guide dog which gets frightened by things like that. So once they pass that, they then go out to these brave people who take on dog to become what we used to call puppy walkers, but then we had people come in saying, can we take your dog for a walk? When do you want it back? And we said, about 18 months, because they then tended to disappear after that conversation. But they're now called puppy raisers, which is a much more accurate description. And Pauline and Brian have puppy raised 4? 6. Which is good. A lady in Exeter called Sylvia, who I know has raised 50. She's now in her 80s and said she was giving up, but then she decided she couldn't face it without a dog, so she started again. So. But it's a huge commitment. You bring this dog into your house, it's going to cost you money. You know, we'll pay for the food and all the rest of it, but things like treats and beds and things like that, you have to pay for yourself, as you know. So when we're checking about who's a suitable person to have a dog, we have to make sure subtly that they're able to sustain looking after it properly, because otherwise it wouldn't be fair to the dog. But I'll pass you back to Pauline now, and she'll tell you a bit more about the puppy raising thing, and I will kick this machine and whisper in its ear and see if I can get it going for the second half.
Right, this is the fun bit. We were looking after the puppies. You get a puppy at about 7 weeks. I think it's still the same, isn't it? Yeah. Oh, 10. Right, we go back a couple of years before COVID. You get this little pup straight from mum and his siblings, and it's frightened, and it's saying, where am I and who are you? You know? So, to begin with, you have to be prepared for sleepless nights and wet beds. It's just like having a baby. All the way through, it's like having a baby, really, because we go through the terrible twos, we go through the teenage stage, and that all happens in about 14 months. As soon as you get the puppy, the first thing, of course, you have to house train them. And the word guide dogs use right across the board is, don't listen, is busy, busy. So you take them out and you say, come on, busy, busy. When they're busy, busy where they're supposed to busy, busy, it's lots of love and treats and, oh, you know, this is nice. If they're busy, busy indoors where they shouldn't, you turn your back on them, ignore them, clear up the mess, and they think, oh, didn't get anything for that one. So perhaps better go out there and do that out there again. Oh, I got treats and loves again. And eventually it sinks in that that's where the best place to go is. It's all about bribery, really, with food. Labradors especially are walking dustbins, and they'll eat food at any time. We have one at home called Captain. He's nearly 10, and like Zach, he's a Labrador Retriever, but he's more lab than Retriever. But he's a beautiful boy. He's huge. He stands up to the height of my hip. He's got the beautiful big head, and he's so gentle. He's my gentle giant. We didn't bring him today because he says, oh, God, Mum, not again. I'm bored now. Can we go home? You know, and he'll start wandering. So we bring Frank. Frank is absolutely wonderful with people. He loves them, and children especially. So we take him to schools and all sorts of places. Now Frank came to us, not as a puppy for guide dogs, as a guide dog. He came to us as a brood dog, a stud dog. And that was fine. We brought him up as you do, same methods as bringing up a guide dog. And at 12 months they said, right, take him off to the breeding centre. Off he went to the breeding centre. The next week he was back. Chocolates are renowned, as David has told you, for not being very good with guide dogs. Frank is slightly different. Are you kicking me? You're telling me to hurry up. Frank is different in that he has a black daddy, a black retriever daddy, and a chocolate mummy. And his mummy was not guide dog bred. She was taken from outside stock, which keeps the genes going, because you can't keep breeding from the same dogs, otherwise you get problems. Frank came back to us. He was given the snip, as you do, and then he was puppy raised by us. He was a wonderful puppy. You know, we had no problems with him. He was very good. And at 14 months, he went off to training. He was in Leamington Spa with a trainer called Mandy Cunningham, who is a very experienced trainer, wonderful with the dogs. And she took him home with her. She said, I don't like my puppies being in kennels. They live with me at home. So she puppy wore Frank, and she tried everything with Frank. He's a wonderful guide dog. She could walk down the road with a blindfold on and be absolutely confident in Frank guiding her. But when it came to change, Frank didn't like it. He didn't like a new home, a new person, having to learn routes, because they do have to learn the routes to the shops and the bus stop and wherever this person wants to go. And he didn't take very well to that at all. So they said, right, send him back to the puppy walkers. And we decided we'd adopt him. So we did. So we now have him and Captain, houseful, and 2 cats as well, just for the measure. But we have to train these puppies not to be guide dogs. We train them to be good, obedient, well-bred dogs. How everybody's puppy should be trained. Pet dogs, everybody. They are taught the basic commands: sit, stay, down, etc. All one-syllable words that the dog can understand. They don't have language. They don't understand what we're saying, but they understand the sound of sit and down and what have you. They are taught not to steal food. And that's fun. And we take them, well, I suppose you take Zag, do you, to puppy classes? Yes, and we used to take ours. And our puppy supervisor there used to put bread rolls on the floor that were as hard as rocks. She'd had them for years. She used to put these down on the floor, and the puppies had to learn to walk past them without going near them. When they did, they got a treat. If they made a dive for them, they got nothing. It's all about positive reinforcement, isn't it? Have I got that right? Yes. Never shout at them. You never punish them. You either praise them for good behaviour or ignore bad behaviour. And it does work. It's like with a child. If a child doesn't get the attention, it'll hopefully do something good that will get its attention. These 2 boys are being very good, although Zag is very interested in Frank. Frank's a bit bored with him. So everything is done to raise these puppies. They don't jump up at people. They walk on a loose lead slowly beside you, and that's fun to begin with, because you're usually dragged along the road at first when they get a lead on. And it's all positive, kind, but firm training. And then, when they're ready to go and learn to be guide dogs, you've got a lovely dog which everybody could have. Everybody's dog could be like that if they trained them. It's hard work, it's 24/7. Very often you think, oh my Lord, is this dog ever going to do what I want it to do? And then suddenly it has a little light bulb moment and it goes, oh, sit. Okay, you want me to put my bottom on the floor? Oh, that's it. And, you know, it's a wonderful moment for you and the dog. No, Zag, that's not how you do it. He's rolling on his back. Yes, basically that is puppy raising. Now I'm going to say something to you all. If you would like to be a puppy raiser, there's nothing to stop any one of you in this hall being one. There's no age limit. You just have to be fit and able to look after a dog. They pay the vet's bills, they buy the food for you, it's delivered to your door, and all they ask of you really is to just carry out the training as they want their dogs to be trained, which is how they should be trained anyway. So have a little think about it. It's good exercise, gets you outside, and it's lovely company as well. You go to the puppy classes and they're hilarious. I mean, you walk through the door, there's a gang of puppies all leaping about and jumping on each other and having great fun, and then teacher comes in and it all has to stop and everybody sits down and does as they're told. But, you know, we used to have Christmas parties, didn't we, Brian? Where our supervisor used to do games. Like, what did she used to do, Brian? All sorts of things. Musical chairs was one. We used to have with a row of chairs and puppies on their razors all playing musical chairs. That was good fun. The chairs used to end up all over the room, and everybody had a good laugh. But anyway, are you sorted, David?
I've had a word in its ear and it's going to do.
You've given us a kick. Okay, I'll hand you back to David.
Cross everything, everybody. Cross everything, yeah. Okay. This is interesting, this slide, which amazed me when I first saw it, what a problem blindness actually is. Because I don't know about any of you, in my working life, I never came across anybody who was blind. I lie, I did once. We had a typist who my secretary recruited who was blind. She came in and said, I've recruited the new typist you want and she's blind. And I said, right, so we got a blind typist, have we? And a dog, she said. So I said, it won't work. She said, it will. And at the end of the month, when we looked at the stats, she was the most accurate typist that we got, and she produced more work than everybody else. So it just shows that just because someone has sight loss, they can't do a proper job. But that was my sole experience of blindness, and I only really got involved when I retired from work. I came down to breakfast the first Monday morning when my wife said, what are you doing here? I said, I'm retired. You're not retired here. She said, go and find something useful to do. Unfortunately, I had a friend who was just retiring as chairman of governors of, do you know the blind school in Exeter on Counties Weir? So I took over from him, and I was there for 6 years with children who were not just blind, but serious complications as well. And it completely, this is an intended pun, seriously opened my eyes to the problems that people with visual impairment have. But what was amazing was the way they compensated. They were extraordinary. They focused entirely on what they could do, not what they couldn't do. And it was an incredible experience. Very labour intensive, 100 children, 300 staff we had there, because we had to have nurses on site who had to tube feed some of the children because they couldn't feed themselves. But it was a revolutionary experience. And that's where I met guide dogs, because we did have a buddy dog in the school, which the buddy dog is a dog which just mixes with people to get used to the dog. It isn't a trained guide dog. But this one had reached massive proportions, mainly because the children every child gave it a biscuit, and it just got bigger and bigger. And then it discovered the kitchen, so it spent its entire life in the kitchen not doing what it was supposed to do. So that was my contact with guide dogs, and I've been with them now for 9 years as a volunteer. My role is much simpler than these guys. I can stand up and talk to people, I can go to schools, and I must say it's jolly nice to be talking to an adult audience, because we won't have to go through the poo questions that we go through. I have never done a school talk yet where I haven't been asked about what happens if the guide dog does a poo. And you can't fob them off. It's not a simple answer. They need to go into enormous detail about what happens. And, so thank you for not doing that. So if you were thinking of asking that question, please don't. Yeah. Okay. The other thing that we are very active in is campaigning. And one of the things we call open doors. It's where people who have a guide dog are refused entry to restaurants or shops. That is against the law, because that person with a guide dog has the protection of being a person who is sighted. So they don't get reported, we don't prosecute enough, but it still happens. Taxi drivers sometimes don't allow the dogs in the taxi. But the ones that are friendly are brilliant with it. It makes our life possible. So that's a big campaign. So it's illegal. Streets and spaces. This is a question of when people redesign town centres without talking to us. Classic case, I think, is Exmouth, where they redone that big square in the middle. There are no curbs. And what do we teach a guide dog to do? Stop at a curb. So we've got a problem that we have to solve as well. Street clutter. People that leave A-boards in the middle of the pavement. People who park, my real hate is people who park their car on the pavement, because that means that person has got to walk into the street, and round there's a chance. And I think there is evidence of some people having been hurt from doing that. So I always stop and have a word with that person. It's never very well received. Shared surfaces, same thing really as streets and spaces. Pavement parking, my bête noire. Transport. E-scooters, nightmare for us, absolute nightmare, because they don't make any noise at all. You know, we've worked on cars, cars now make a noise, you probably know, it's now the law with new cars have to have a sort of funny bleeping noise so the dog can hear it. But e-scooters make no noise at all, frightening. Talking buses, we're winning that, but imagine you're a blind person, you get on a bus and you want to go to, I don't know, anywhere. If you don't know where you are, and the bus isn't telling you, you'll end up in the terminus every time, which is not helpful. Electric vehicles, we've been training on electric vehicles. As I say, now they make a noise, it's a bit better. But the stupid thing is, you can turn it off. I mean, who thought that brilliant thing out? Yeah. And children and young people, who we do a lot of work with now, is about awareness for the future, bringing them up so they can live a normal life as possible. And attacks on guide dogs. We just had the latest stats for 2021. There were 111 unprovoked attacks on guide dogs. 65% of them were staffed. And I think that's because the sort of people who can't have a pit bull tend to get a staffy and treat it like a pit bull. And a lot of those dogs won't work again. If they're traumatised enough, they just won't work. So we've wasted time, money, and God knows what else. Yeah. I talked about this before. 18 months was the figure just before these slides were produced. It's now 2 years, the waiting time for a dog. Despite Unity delivering 16 puppies, there's still a lot of catching up to do. Less than 50% success on training a guide dog, because we have not been able to do the normal things like go out, go in the shops, meet people and all these sorts of things. Yeah. This is the real thing, understanding visual impairment. What is it like to be visually impaired? I'm not sure this is going to work. No, it's not, so we'll move on. Now this is apologise, this is one of the things I use for schools. What I say to schools now, I want you all to close your eyes completely so you can't see anything, and tell me how you would find your way home. And if you all do the same thing, it's really disorientating. I mean, up in our breeding centre, they've got what's called a tunnel which you walk through. Sorry. Thank you. I'll talk to you later. Well, you walk through this tunnel which is completely blacked out, and you're blacked out, and it is the most appalling feeling. Totally disorientating. You don't know what's up, what's down, what's going on. And that's the thing that these people face every day. So it's a big thing. So what I say to them is do that. Stand there with your eyes closed. Now how are you going to get home? I couldn't. So what we do next is along comes a helping hand that says, okay, I'll take you to the loo or wherever you want to go. And leading on from that, a helping dog, and that's really what dogs do, if you want to summarise it. All the other activities we do are different sorts, but the primary one of a guide dog is guiding, and that's helping you to avoid horrible things happening to you. I'm going to concentrate on dogs today, because I can talk for hours on all sorts of other things. I like to call it another pair of eyes, because that's basically you're replacing the eyesight of that person with somebody who will avoid falling down holes and all those dreadful things that happen. That was a video which won't play. Two quotes I particularly like. These are one of the first two I came across when I was involved, and it is true. It gives people a life back. We gave one to a lady in, I think it was Tiverton, who had not been out of the house on her own for 45 years. She was too afraid to go out. But once she got the dog, she went bananas. I mean, she went everywhere. She even went to, what's that festival called? The folk... Glastonbury, yeah. She actually got up there to the folk festival and came back covered in mud like everybody else was. Brilliant, yeah. But it changed her life. And this are some pictures of examples. The one on the left is a girl in America who is a cross-country runner, who has had permission to run with her dog, providing the dog does not pull her. How on earth you keep an eye on that, I don't know. The one in the middle was the lady we were talking about that hadn't been out of her house. The one on the right was a boy that was afraid to go to school. Everyone made fun of him. When he turned up with his dog, he became the class hero because they all wanted to meet the dog. Sorry, am I blocking your view? Is that better? And the one at the bottom is always someone does something bloody stupid, don't they? And I must say the dog does not look that amused to me in that picture. But there is this extraordinary bond between a blind person and a dog. It's not about being a dog, it's about a friend, companion. And they're more, can you imagine it when they lose their dog? I mean, we've all lost dogs, how awful it is. But if you're blind and lose your dog, it must be absolutely dreadful. This is taken from a book published in 1300 and something, and it is showing a dog leading someone along who's clearly blind. I mean, it's not trained like our current guide dogs are, but historically that goes back a hell of a long way. This was first real guide dogs trained properly. This was in America, an organisation called Seeing Eye. They were the first people to set up a training program formally for guide dogs. And these are the first 4 guide dogs that we trained in this country in 1933. All German Shepherds. Time has moved on, as I said before, but revolutionary. I pity I can't play you these videos because they're quite nice. Yeah. I pinched them off the BBC, right. Breeding, we talked about this before. 1,200 puppies we were breeding before the lockdown. It's gone down a bit since then for obvious reasons, but it's going back up again. And we talked about them going into Leamington Spa. We have a state-of-the-art centre in Leamington Spa, but all the breeding bitches are within 1 hour drive of the Leamington Spa Centre, so if they do get into difficulties, obviously the 16 puppies wasn't born in someone's house, or they'd have shot themselves by now, I think. I rang a girl up there and said, "Isn't it wonderful news?" "No, it isn't," she said. "It's a bloody nightmare." She said, "Every door you open has got a dog behind it." Puppy raising, we've already heard from Pauline. This is Frank, on the left. being walked in Leamington Spa. As Pauline said, he did everything right. He just had a separation situation which he couldn't cope with. I'll let it run a little bit. See, he's doing it perfectly. I mean, so yeah, but he's such a lovely dog, yeah. Early training at a national centre, that's when they start the proper guide doggy type training. Because when these guys are puppy raising, they just teach them the basics, like stay, stand still, all the usual things. The one thing you mustn't teach them to do is walk to heel. Because it's no good having a guide dog that's behind you after you've fallen down a big hole in the ground. You really want the dog to have done it first, yeah. Yeah. Advanced training, that then becomes really the serious stuff when they're really working at getting everything right. And then matching the dog, this is really important. You've got to match a dog with a person for the two of them to be able to gel together. I mean, we wouldn't give one of these 16 puppies, we wouldn't give to an old lady of 75. Being dragged along the road by a German Shepherd is not what we're looking for. So we're careful about that. And it doesn't need to look like its owner. Like that. Which is a brilliant photograph, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, you could almost swap heads and it would still work, wouldn't it? Yeah. Then partnership training. Once the match has been made, they then go away together to a hotel in, where is it still the same place? I can't remember. The hotel. Somewhere in Devon. That's narrowed it down dramatically, isn't it? And they live in the hotel basically with the dog for a period of time so they get used to each other and do all the right things. Yeah. Then final qualification, that requires them to be actually followed normally. What happens is one of the trainers follows them around the town, hiding behind things so they don't get seen. We haven't had anybody arrested yet, it's only a matter of time, I think. But they then say, yeah, this is a working partnership. We'll run with that, yeah. And these are just a very simple slide of basically what guide dogs actually do. Turn left or right on command, halt on command, perform advanced obedient exercises. When people get a guide dog, they all teach them to do things that they want them to do. We tell them not to, but they don't take a blind bit of notice. How are they trained? As Pauline has said, it's entirely by positive reinforcement, which is a technique that seems to work very well. Now, this is a video of a guide dog that's got a dash cam strapped on its back, so there's no sound on it, so I can probably play this one all right, yeah. And it's quite interesting to count how many potential things a blind person would have fallen foul of if they didn't have the dog. She's now just waiting for the cars to go by. But she will not give the command to cross the road. I'll talk about that later. The music's rubbish anyway, so it's probably just as well you don't hear it, yeah. Obstacles here, obviously. A board, chaos. See, you can put them tucked away out of the way. Bicycle, that would have been interesting. And then she'll stop when she gets to a curb, you'll see in a minute. Right, now she'll stop. Here's a curb. Now she'll wait for a command here, be it go straight on or be it turn left or right. But they won't make that decision, that's up to the guide dog owner. And then she's gone left, yeah. You'll be familiar with this, won't you? Another one, stop. And then we come to some steps, which steps are interesting because potentially that's a real danger for someone with reduced vision. So the dog will stop, put its foot on the bottom step, and it will wait for the command. And here again, she'll stop, touch away, off you go. Now this looks a simple walk to you and I, doesn't it? It would be dead easy, but if you couldn't see anything at all, you'd be dead about 3 times so far, to my guess on this. And she's taking him back to the bus station where they get their bus, and she knows which bus to go to as well, which is quite clever. There she goes, that's mine. Now, one question we're often asked is how do guide dogs know where to go? The answer is because they've been trained to do that. So before you're written, when you're allowed to have a dog, you have to go on, I think it's 3 tests. Is it still 3? 3 routes that you have to walk with the dog to go along. And what a lot of blind people do is they count how many steps it is so they know roughly where they are. Now, it's a little bit about our dogs. This is how many dogs we've got on the go at any one time, so quite a lot, in various stages, puppy raising and everything else. And these are the breeds. As I said, over 50% are actually golden retriever crosses. 28% pure labs, 10% golden retrievers, 5% German shepherds, but they're coming back again now because we're finding them easier to train. We've got a very good bitch. Although the one that had the 16 puppies won't be bred again. She's done her bit for her country, so she can go into retirement now. And 1% other breeds. There's a collie shown there. They are hopeless. Talk about distracted. Anything that moves, they'll be after it. And as I said to some people here before, we don't train chocolate Labradors. They're impossible. Lovely dogs. They go on to do wonderful things like assistance dogs, but they just do not make guide dogs. They're distracted by anything, virtually. So one side of the road, oh look, there's a burglar van over the road. They'll be off here, yeah. Oh, I love them. Those are my 2 Rhodesian Ridgebacks with my granddaughter. The most unsuitable dog that you could possibly get for a guide dog. They would misbehave appallingly. But woe betide anyone that threatened my granddaughter. That's a day in the life, which again is a video. Just a little bit about finance. It costs us £76 million a year, and we get no government funding. I lie, we get 100,000 of government funding to do some specific training for veterans who come back from the wars who are blind, but that's only for their dogs. So the rest of it we have to raise ourselves. Now, I'm an accountant, and at the beginning of the year when you sit down with a budget with no guarantee of any income, I will probably die of fright, I should think. But every year it seems to work. And this is just a very quick thing. Big increase. During the lockdown, we had bad time giving service, but we made more profit during lockdown. And the sad reason is because more people died of COVID and left us money, which is very sad. But if you can see the figures, 48 million in the previous year, up to 77 million during 2021, during COVID, yeah. It's a sad reason, isn't it, for getting it right. This is just shows you what we spend our money on. We're near the end now. Most of it is still guide dogs, although it's getting more onto the other things as well. Just some misconceptions. Guide dogs can read. No, they can't. And there's a video which I still can't find, I've been looking for in America, where there's a lady in the middle of Times Square, put a handle down on her dog, which says she needs some help, and a very posh lady comes up and says, "Can I help you?" And she said, "I don't know where I am and I need to go to Times Square." So this woman hitches up her trousers, gets down on her knees, and says to the dog, "You go to the end of the road." Second misconception, they don't know when to cross the road. The decision to cross the road is made by the guide dog owner. However, if the guide dog senses there's a danger, it will stop them crossing the road. But it's not their decision. All guide dog owners are blind? No, they're not. I mean, in fact, a very small proportion are. And people will sometimes say to me, "I've seen someone with a guide dog who can clearly see, they don't need one." And then you find out this person's got what they call tunnel vision, so they can only see what's in front of them. So if a car came, wouldn't see it. So yeah. And a couple of notes, I'm sure you all too, this is the kids love this bit. Never feed a guide dog, because that sees that as a reward, and whatever it was doing, it thinks, "I'll do that again, that sounds pretty good." Disaster for us, yeah. And I'm sure you all know, never pet a guide dog while it's working, because it gets distracted. This is our new royal patron, Sophie Wessex. Princess Alexandra had been our patron for 52 years before she handed it over, and she's now well in her 80s. And she was brilliant. She came to the centre. She just didn't look round. She got involved. She played with the puppies. She got peed on, so she had all the pleasantries that we all look forward to. And there's some brochures out there. If we've inspired any thoughts in you to give us some help, have you got some brochures, Brian? On the table at the back, yeah. That's it. Thank you. I'm sorry about the mucks with the IT, but I hope you enjoyed it. We will now answer any questions anyone's got.